Before the summer of 1988, the Carr family enjoyed a peaceful, picture-perfect life in the quiet town of Alturas. Deeply devoted to their faith, they never missed a Sunday at church and were widely seen as a calm, trouble-free household. That tranquility vanished on June 14th, when 16-year-old Dwayne found a threatening letter in their mailbox. The anonymous message was chilling and direct. "Leave Florida or face fatal consequences." Alarmed, Dwayne quickly brought it to his parents. His mother, Peggy, was instantly terrified, while his father, Perrylin, brushed it off as a heartless prank. As summer faded into fall, the family's anxiety only intensified. Then, on October 23rd, disaster struck. Peggy became suddenly and seriously ill, suffering from violent nausea and unbearable pain. Her once thick hair began to fall out in disturbing clumps. Even as her symptoms worsened, Perrylin refused to take her to the hospital, convinced it was nothing more than a temporary sickness. But Peggy's health continued to deteriorate rapidly. Within a week, Peggy slipped into a coma. To the family's shock, Dwayne soon began experiencing the same terrifying symptoms. The crisis finally drew the attention of law enforcement, triggering a full police investigation. Then, on December 2nd, investigators made a stunning discovery. The family had been poisoned with thallium, a deadly substance often used in rat poison. Tests revealed that every member of the Carr family, including Perrylin, had dangerously elevated levels of the toxin in their bodies. As detectives dug deeper, a chilling truth emerged. The Carrs were being deliberately and systematically attacked. The threatening letter had not been a cruel joke. It had been a warning of the horror that followed. A desperate race began to identify the culprit and stop them before they could strike again. In 1988, 16-year-old Dwayne enjoyed a carefree life with his family in the peaceful community of Alturas, Florida. His mother, Peggy, worked long hours as a waitress at the town's diner. After years of raising 3 children alone, she had finally found happiness with Perrylin Carr, who brought 2 additional children into their newly blended family. Their days in Alturas felt near perfect. Quiet streets, friendly neighbors, and a town so safe that people rarely bothered locking their doors. It was the kind of place that seemed made for families. But everything changed on October 23rd. Before dawn, Peggy headed to work as she always did. Soon after arriving, she was struck by a sudden burning sensation in her legs and feet, which quickly escalated into severe chest pain. Nearly unable to stand, she was rushed to the hospital. Despite running multiple tests, doctors were unable to identify the source of her mysterious illness and discharged her with pain medication, leaving her and her family without answers. A week later, on October 30th, the situation became even more terrifying. Peggy, Dwayne, and his stepbrother Travis were all rushed to the hospital, each suffering from the same agonizing symptoms. The pain was so intense that they feared they were on the brink of death. Peggy was admitted straight into the intensive care unit. There, an infectious disease specialist noticed a disturbing detail. Peggy's hair was coming out in large clumps. This alarming clue suggested she might have been poisoned. He ordered tests for thallium, a highly toxic substance banned in the US in 1972, but still lingering in older rat poisons. The results were shocking. Peggy had 50 times the lethal dose of thallium in her bloodstream. The following day, October 31st, Peggy slipped into a coma. Travis had to be placed on a respirator, and Dwayne showed no signs of getting better. The family's nightmare was far from over. The police launched an urgent investigation, determined to uncover the source of the poisoning before anyone else was hurt. They combed through the surrounding orange groves, analyzed the neighborhood's water supply, and inspected every corner of the diner where Peggy worked. Despite their efforts, no traces of thallium turned up. As word spread, fear swept through the community. Residents demanded answers, terrified that they might be at risk. Investigators then focused on the Carr home, gathering dust samples and collecting more than 400 household items for testing. One discovery immediately stood out: a 6-pack of Coke bottles, 3 of them still unopened. Lab tests showed that each bottle contained over a gram of thallium, more than enough to kill an adult. Realizing the gravity of this find, the lead detective concluded there were only two explanations. The first theory pointed to product tampering at the Coke factory. If that were true, countless others might have unknowingly consumed the poisoned drinks. The contamination could have spread far beyond the county, possibly across the entire state or even the country. Panic erupted and people became afraid to drink Coke at all. Investigators initially zeroed in on the bottling company, but with Coca-Cola's full cooperation, they quickly eliminated the possibility of large-scale tampering. The production process made it virtually impossible for the bottles to be contaminated at the plant. That left only one chilling conclusion. The poisoning had been deliberate, and Peggy Carr and her family were the intended targets. The investigation turned inward, examining family members closely. Peggy's husband, Perilyn Carr, emerged as a primary suspect. Despite being married for only 7 months, the couple's honeymoon period had been short-lived. Perilyn worked long hours at the mine, and Peggy had grown suspicious. One night, she discovered him with another woman. Adding to the suspicion, the weekend Peggy first fell ill, Perilyn was conveniently out of town. Upon his return, he resisted taking her to the hospital. As investigators delved deeper into Perilyn's background, they sought any motive that might explain why he would poison his wife. Despite his troubling behavior, one question nagged at the police. Why would Perilyn poison his own son, Travis? During interrogation, Perilyn revealed a puzzling clue. On June 14th, for months before Peggy fell ill, Dwayne found a letter in the mailbox. The letter contained a yellow post-it with a threatening typewritten note warning the family to leave Florida within 2 weeks or face death. Dwayne and his siblings initially laughed it off, but Perilyn's dismissive attitude now seemed more suspicious. The police later learned that this was not the first ominous incident in the Carr household. A few years prior, 2 of their dogs had died suddenly, both exhibiting symptoms of severe illness and hair loss. This led to a chilling suspicion. They might have been used for experimentation. As Peggy's health continued to deteriorate and Dwayne and Travis showed no signs of improvement, the entire family underwent testing for thallium. The results were far more alarming than anyone anticipated. Every member of the household, including Perilyn Carr, had traces of thallium in their system. This revelation cleared Perilyn as a suspect, as it seemed implausible that someone with the knowledge to commit such a crime would risk ingesting the poison themselves. Even Peggy's 2-year-old granddaughter, Casey, had traces of thallium. On March 3, 1989, after 5 months of suffering, Peggy's condition reached its tragic conclusion. Dwayne was called to her bedside for the final time as the family faced the heartbreaking decision to remove her from life support. Peggy Carr passed away at the age of 41, leaving the family devastated. With Peggy's death, the investigation took a new turn. It was now a murder case. Poisoning someone is a rare and calculated method of murder, often devised by a demented yet brilliant mind. The FBI's examination of the contaminated Coke bottles revealed tiny scratch marks, indicating they had been meticulously tampered with. The thallium had been added, the caps resealed, and the bottles appeared untouched. Thallium, being tasteless and odorless, dissolves easily but usually causes noticeable changes in soda. However, the mixture found in the Coke bottles was sophisticated, avoiding typical signs like overflow, discoloration, or sediment. This pointed to the work of someone with advanced knowledge of chemistry, a highly intelligent individual who believed they were smarter than everyone else. Police began questioning neighbors and townspeople. Alturas, a small community of a few hundred residents, saw every single person interviewed as investigators sought to uncover the perpetrator behind this heinous act. The closest neighbors to the Carr family were George Trapal and his wife, Diana. When the detectives questioned Trapal, his reaction was shockingly harsh. Trapal launched into a tirade about the redneck children and family living next to him. When asked why anyone would want to poison the Carr family, Trapal's response was unsettlingly specific. Someone wanted them to leave. This echoed the exact message in the threatening letter received by the Carrs, a detail only known to law enforcement. This peculiar response made Trapal a prime suspect. Further investigation revealed that George Trapal was a self-taught chemist, while his wife, Diana, held a master's degree in chemistry. Both were members of an elite society for individuals with IQs in the top 2% of the population. Digging deeper, investigators discovered Trapal had a criminal background. He had served time in prison for being the chemist in a major methamphetamine operation. One of the ingredients commonly used in producing methamphetamine is thallium. The spotlight on George Trapal as a person of interest shocked even Peggy's son, Dwayne, who couldn't believe Trapal was capable of such a heinous act. The detectives uncovered that Trapal had previously had a confrontation with the Carr family over loud music. Just 48 hours after this argument, Peggy Carr was poisoned. Despite these connections, the police lacked concrete proof to arrest Trapal. Standard police procedure often involves bringing a suspect in for questioning, hoping for a confession. However, detectives believed this approach wouldn't work with Trapal, an introverted and non-confrontational individual. Instead, the FBI proposed a different strategy. Someone had to go undercover to outsmart Trapal. The police assigned Special Agent Susan Gorek to infiltrate the group to which George Trapal belonged. The aim was to gain Trapal's trust and gather enough evidence to prove his involvement in the poisoning. Initially, it seemed that Detective Susan Gorek would only need to go undercover for a weekend. However, she was warned about Trapal's photographic memory. If he saw them, he could remember their cars or faces. Under an assumed identity, Susan prepared to attend a murder mystery gathering hosted by George Trapal and his wife, Diana. Susan Gorek transformed into a woman on the verge of divorcing an abusive husband. On April 14, 1989, she headed to the local hotel where the event was being held. Upon arrival, she was greeted by none other than George Trapal himself. Face to face with the suspected killer, Susan's biggest fear was that Trapal might recognize her from previous surveillance operations. She took a deep breath, searching for any sign of recognition in his eyes, but Trapal didn't seem to recognize her. Nevertheless, Susan had to remain vigilant. In her undercover role, Susan knew Trapal was not the type to confront directly. He was the kind who would poison his victims, causing a slow and painful death. The risk was immense. Introducing herself as Sherry Gwynn, she registered for the event and received a packet containing the weekend's information, prepared by Trapal himself. The pamphlet detailed several well-planned murder scenarios, one of which involved poisoning. One paragraph in particular stood out. It mentioned that when a death threat appears on the doorstep, prudent people throw out all their food and watch what they eat. The message was strikingly similar to the one the Carr family had received before Peggy was poisoned. This eerie similarity convinced Susan she had the right suspect. Throughout the weekend, Susan engaged Trapal in conversation, carefully watching every word he said, knowing one slip could cost her life. When Trapal asked about her background, Susan mentioned her fictional husband, a lawyer from Houston, Texas, and how she had left him. Trapal shared how he could tell when someone was lying by the way their neck muscles moved, making Susan even more nervous. Before the weekend ended, she confided in Trapal that she intended to move to Florida to escape her husband. This revelation led to a crucial breakthrough. Trapal mentioned that he and his wife were considering moving her practice and selling their house. After consulting with her supervisors, Detective Susan was instructed to continue her undercover operation beyond the initial weekend. Susan knew this extended mission was her chance to find crucial evidence that could secure a search warrant for Trapal's house. She hoped to discover lab equipment or chemicals that would link Trapal to the crime. The following week, Susan visited Trapal's house. During the tour, Trapal mentioned how safe Alturas was, boasting that no one locked their doors. Although Susan noticed several suspicious items, including a secret passageway in the library and a mannequin with bondage gear, none were sufficient for a search warrant. Despite the failed plan, Susan maintained her Sherry Gwynn persona, determined to gather more evidence. She was acutely aware of the risks. Exposing her true identity could lead to her and her family's harm. Trapal, a highly intelligent individual, could easily resort to poisoning her if he discovered she was an undercover detective. Over the next several months, Susan met with Trepal for a series of lunch dates, always under surveillance. She never ate or drank anything after leaving the table, wary of Trepal's potential to harm her. During these meetings, Trepal gradually revealed his disdain for people he considered less intelligent, giving Susan insights into his mindset. After 8 months, Susan had collected numerous small pieces of evidence, but not enough to build a solid case. Her supervisors began to question the operation's value, threatening to shut it down. To Susan, failure was not an option. She was driven by the need to secure justice for Peggy Carr and her family, imagining how it could have been her own loved ones who drank the poison. In December 1989, Susan received the breakthrough call she had been waiting for. George and Diana Trepal had moved out of town and offered Sherry Gwynn the chance to move into their home. Without needing a warrant, Susan now had legal permission to enter the house and invite the county crime scene unit to investigate. Believing Trepal was too clever to leave obvious traces of thallium, the team focused on finding residue in places like the air conditioning filter or drains. The house was still filled with Trepal's belongings, providing ample opportunities for collecting samples. In the garage of George Trepal's house, investigators collected vials and chemistry bottles, hoping one would test positive for thallium. As they awaited results from the FBI lab, Susan continued her role as Sherry Gwynn, even as ideas and scenarios to engage Trepal ran thin. Time was running out. By January 1990, with no news from the lab, Susan knew she had to take action. She decided to try and trick Trepal into incriminating himself, unaware that Trepal was also preparing a trap for her. Susan arranged a meeting with Trepal at a picnic area behind a McDonald's in Sebring, the town where he was living. This critical meeting was recorded on tape. During their conversation, Susan handed Trepal a business card claiming it was left by detectives searching for him. Trepal's behavior changed noticeably. He became extremely nervous. His agitation was palpable as he tried to maintain composure. He repeatedly asked Susan to come over to his new house, which she declined. The tension was high. What might have happened if she had agreed to visit his home? After the meeting, Trepal walked away visibly shaken, his nerves clearly frayed by the news Susan had shared. This encounter marked a turning point. On April 4, 1990, Susan received an unexpected call. The FBI had found thallium in one of the vials collected from Trepal's garage. Specifically, it contained thallium nitrate, the exact compound used in the poisoning of Peggy Carr and the attempted murder of her entire family. This discovery was the crucial piece of evidence needed to solidify the case against Trepal. The following day, April 5th, George Trepal was arrested at his new home in Sebring. The sight of Trepal being escorted in an orange jumpsuit into the county jail marked the end of a long and dangerous investigation. The same man Susan had to trust during her undercover mission was now facing justice for his crimes. Even when confronted with the truth about her identity, George Trepal remained unfazed. Susan, now revealing herself as a special agent from the county sheriff's office, served him with a warrant for handwriting samples. Trepal simply smiled and responded, "Oh, okay." Unbeknownst to Susan, she had narrowly escaped becoming Trepal's next victim. When police searched Trepal's home in Sebring, they made a shocking discovery. Behind a pegboard, they found a hidden room with no inside door handle and a sealed, soundproof window. Inside, there was a platform bed equipped with wooden stirrups and a pulley system designed to lift people. Trepal had been constructing a bed for torture. The realization of what could have happened if she had visited his home was horrifying for Susan. In January 1991, as George Trepal's trial began, the jury was presented with overwhelming evidence. Among the items collected from Trepal's house was a journal titled General Poisoning Guides, which described thallium as the poison of choice for criminals. The journal contained references to getting rid of neighbors, and 55 fingerprints in the journal matched Trepal's. The prosecution also showcased the tools used to tamper with the Coke bottles. A set of tiny screwdrivers, one of which was missing, perfectly matched the tool marks on the bottle caps. This damning evidence shocked the jury. Throughout the trial, Trepal remained calm and emotionless, sometimes even smiling. His lack of remorse and his calculated actions demonstrated a chilling level of evil. He had justified his heinous acts with his belief in his superior intelligence and the idea that those less intelligent did not deserve to live. The trial lasted 2 months, but it only took the jury 4 hours to reach a verdict. On March 6, 1991, nearly 2 years after Peggy Carr's death, George Trapal was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to death. The final sentence was delivered with gravitas. The defendant, George James Trapal, shall be electrocuted until he is dead. With these words, justice was served for Peggy Carr. Special Agent Susan's relentless dedication and bravery brought a criminal mastermind to justice. She risked everything, putting her life on the line to ensure Trapal faced the consequences of his heinous actions. Reflecting on Susan's efforts, one cannot help but admire her courage. She went above and beyond to bring Peggy's killer to justice, earning the respect and gratitude of many. The rest of Peggy Carr's family, who were also poisoned, made full recoveries. However, the loss of Peggy had a profound impact on her son, Dwayne. Losing his mother at the tender age of 16 was a traumatic experience that left deep emotional scars. In the years following her death, Dwayne struggled with grief, often expressing it through anger and outbursts. Eventually, Dwayne found solace in writing to his mother. In a heartfelt letter, he poured out his emotions. "Dear Mom, this is your baby boy. I'd like to tell you that I love you and I'm sorry for all the bad things I've ever done to you. Hopefully, you're in a better place now. I often think about you and wish you were here. I haven't been so good and I'm sorry. I'll try to get my life straight." Dwayne made good on his promise. Today, he is married and has become the father figure his own family deserves. Every day, he strives to make his mother proud and keep her memory alive. Dwayne doubly stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, showing that even after unimaginable tragedy, a life worth living is possible. Years have passed since Alyssa Burkett's life was tragically cut short. Her daughter Willow has grown up in a loving family, surrounded by the care of her grandparents. Each year on Alyssa's birthday, they visit her grave, remembering her beauty, kindness, and boundless love. The memory of Alyssa lives on in the hearts of her loved ones, in every beat of little Willow's heart. And while the pain of loss will never fade, they know Alyssa will always be with them in their thoughts, actions, and hopes for a better future. Her story is a sad but important reminder of how fragile life is, and how important it is to appreciate loved ones while they are close by. Alyssa Ann Burkett was born on the 31st of December, 1995 in Mesquite, Texas, to Teresa Ann Burkett and Joshua Forsyth. She had 3 sisters, Nikki, Madison, and Taylor, and 2 brothers, Lamden and Tyler. From a young age, Alyssa displayed creative inclinations. At the age of 7, she dreamed of becoming a fashion designer and crafting her own clothing. She enthusiastically sketched designs for future outfits. Her grandfather, Russell Forsyth, a songwriter, encouraged his granddaughter's passion and hoped she would continue his legacy. However, at the age of 13, Alyssa changed her plans and decided to pursue a career in law. She explained to her grandfather that she enjoyed arguing and felt a calling in it. Russell supported his granddaughter's choice, albeit mourning about the necessity of diligent study on this path. After graduating from Roy City High School, Alyssa enrolled in a local college. At 18, she discovered she was expecting a child with her boyfriend, Andrew Bird, who was 9 years her senior. This unplanned pregnancy caught Alyssa off guard and compelled her to reassess her life plans. Alyssa parted ways with Andrew, deciding to raise her daughter on her own. She dropped out of college and dedicated herself entirely to motherhood. On the 31st of December 2019, her 24th birthday, Alyssa gave birth to a healthy baby girl whom she named Willow. Despite the challenges, Alyssa strived to be an exemplary mother. Her relatives noted that she wanted to provide her daughter with a stable and loving family, a privilege she was deprived of in her own childhood due to her parents' divorce. On her social media platforms, Alyssa appeared vivacious and open. She shared family photos, thoughts, and interests. Those close to her described her as straightforward, energetic, with a heart of gold and a radiant smile. Alyssa worked tirelessly to provide for her daughter. She was an assistant at a real estate firm and an employee at a management company. At the time of her demise, she was working at Green Tree, a residential real estate company. She was stubborn, determined, sometimes selfish, but you couldn't stay mad at her for long. She had eternal beauty and charm, reminisced her grandfather Russell. He and the entire family were devastated when Alyssa's life tragically ended at the age of 24. Alyssa Burkett met Andrew Bird in her teenage years. He was 9 years her senior and appeared as a mysterious bad boy. Despite the protests of her relatives, Alyssa began to court him. The relationship was unstable and complex. Bird did not work and relied on Alyssa for support, yet he was possessive, causing scenes and monitoring every move of the young woman. Friends advised her to break up with him multiple times, but she always returned. In January 2019, 23-year-old Alyssa discovered she was pregnant with Bird's child. She decided to keep the baby, although she doubted Andrew as a future father. Eventually, she left him, choosing to raise her daughter on her own. On December 31st, 2019, Alyssa gave birth to a girl named Willow. With the help of her family, especially her grandparents, she tried to provide her daughter with a peaceful childhood, and kept Baird away, deeming him unreliable. However, Baird was unwilling to back down. He initiated a fierce legal battle for custody of Willow, declaring he would achieve his goal at any cost, stating that nothing will stop him. Alyssa feared retaliation from his side. In April 2020, just 4 months after Willow's birth, a new woman entered Andrew's life, 22-year-old Holly Elkins. Elkins quickly moved in with Bird and began making plans for their life together and raising his daughter. The appearance of the young stepmother only intensified the conflict. Elkins saw Alyssa as a rival and actively sought to eliminate her from Bird's life. She positioned herself as the perfect mother for Willow. Alyssa felt a growing threat from her ex-boyfriend and his fiancée GC. Friends advised her to be cautious and wary of the worst. Little did she know that her life would soon be cut short by their hands. Shortly after Andrew Bird and Holly Elkins started their relationship, they launched a full-scale campaign to persecute Alyssa Burkett. Their aim was to completely destroy her reputation and strip her of parental rights to gain full custody of Bird's daughter, Willow. In her messages, Elkins openly expressed her obsession with removing Alyssa as a mother. She wrote to Bird that Alyssa controls him, puts him first, and that he must show his submission to his ex and deal with this mess. Elkins insulted Alyssa, calling her a liar, stupid, and a bad man. She instigated Bird, claiming that Alyssa stood in the way of their happy family life with Willow and urged him to take radical actions. One instance of slander was not enough for Elkins. Together with Bird, installed a GPS tracker on Alyssa's car, monitoring her every move. Elkins then anonymously called 911, falsely reporting Alyssa for allegedly driving erratically, trying to discredit her to the police. Another time, Elkins went to the police and falsely accused Alyssa's mother of attacking her. To corroborate her story, she even deliberately scratched her own chest. The couple hired a private detective to find dirt on Alyssa and her new partner. Although the investigator found nothing incriminating, Bird and Elkins persisted. In September 2020, they themselves planted drugs and unregistered weapons in Alyssa's car and anonymously informed the police that Alyssa was allegedly dealing drugs from her trunk. During questioning, Alyssa tearfully insisted she had no involvement with drugs. She immediately suspected Bird's involvement, trying to tarnish her in the eyes of child services and the police. Unfortunately, she couldn't prove it. The persecution took on an increasingly menacing tone. A week before the murder, Elkins wrote to Bird, "I hope you can handle this." She demanded that he go or die for her, clearly hinting of the impending crime. Unbeknownst to herself, Alyssa was in mortal danger. She had only a few days left to live. Following direct instructions from his fiancée, GC Holly Elkins, Andrew Bird began the direct preparation for the murder of Alyssa Burkett. They acted deliberately and methodically, planning every detail of the crime. On September 10, 2020, just 3 weeks before the tragedy, Elkins accompanied Bird to a sporting goods store. There, he purchased a black raincoat in cash, which he would later use in the attack. Elkins clearly assisted him in selecting suitable attire for the crime. On September 14th, they visited a pharmacy, where Elkins bought dark foundation and other cosmetics for makeup. Evidently, she planned to disguise Bird to hinder his identification by witnesses. Later, the police would find this makeup in Bird's car, along with wipes containing traces of makeup. On September 19th, the couple visited a hardware store, where they bought shotgun shells and a large Camillus knife. It was this shotgun and knife that Bird would soon use to carry out his vengeance on the mother of his daughter. Over the past week of September, Elkins inundated Bird with messages, goading him to put the plan into action. She wrote that they needed to deal with this go or die. Elkins explicitly stated that their relationship would be at risk if he did not follow through to the end. Receiving a clear signal, Bird got down to business. The search history on his phone shows that he began looking for information on how to remove gunpowder residue from his hands after a shot. He clearly did not want to leave any traces. 6 days before the attack, Bird bought a used black Ford Expedition advertised. He planned to use it for surveillance on Alyssa and his transportation to the crime scene. The seller later identified Bird as the buyer. A day before the attack, Bird attached a homemade silencer to his .22 caliber pistol. Although he ultimately did not use it in the attack, the mere fact of making the silencer demonstrates the purposefulness of his actions. Finally, on the morning of October 2nd, disguised himself as an African American, donned the black raincoat, and headed to Alyssa's house in a parked SUV nearby. Thanks to Elkins's messages, he knew the victim's daily routine and could anticipate where to find her. The plan was set. Bird and Elkins had considered all the details. They were prepared to ruthlessly execute the mother of 1.5-year-old Willow in broad daylight. There was no turning back. On the morning of October 2nd, 2020, nothing foreshadowed the tragedy. 24-year-old Alyssa Bouquet, as usual, dropped off her 1.5-year-old daughter Willow at her grandmother's and headed to work at the Green Tree Homes Management Company in Carrollton. She parked her car in front of the office around 9 a.m. and was about to enter the building. At that moment, a black SUV sped towards her car at full speed. A man in a black cloak with a hood and a mask covering his face jumped out of it. To call for help, a bloody trail followed her. Noticing the movement, swiftly turned around. He pulled out a large hunting knife from under his cloak and lunged towards Alyssa writhing on the ground. Grabbing her by the hair, he viciously began stabbing her in the neck, chest, and abdomen. In total, Bird inflicted no fewer than 13 stab wounds. From the injuries sustained, Alyssa died on the spot. When her colleagues, hearing the screams, rushed out to the parking lot, they found Alyssa in a pool of blood, her throat slashed. They tried to perform CPR, but in vain. By that time, Bird had already fled in his black SUV, leaving the bloodied knife on the parking lot. Random witnesses described the assailant as a tall, muscular man dressed in all black, with a mask or hood on his head. Many mistook him for an African American. At the time of the attack, Holly Elkins, according to her own words, was at home with Bird's daughter, Willow. Thus, she had an alibi. Later, she told the police that Bird allegedly was with her all this time, which turned out to be a lie. The brutal daylight murder in a crowded place shocked the residents of Carrollton. They were puzzled about the motives of the criminal. However, Alyssa's relatives and friends immediately suspected Andrew Bird. They were aware of the protracted conflict between the former partners and feared the worst. Alyssa's mother, barely holding back tears, informed the police of her suspicions regarding Bird. She recounted his threats and obsession with her daughter, the prolonged legal battle for custody of her granddaughter. According to her, Bird had repeatedly stated that the living Alyssa Willow would not get. Thus began one of the most shocking and resonant trials in the history of Texas, a trial that made local residents rethink seemingly the familiar issue of domestic violence and stalking. The name of Alyssa Burkett will long be remembered as a symbol of maternal love and resilience in the face of cruelty. The investigation into Alyssa Burkett's murder began with questioning witnesses of the crime scene. Alyssa's colleagues detailed the appearance and actions of the assailant. Although he wore a mask, his tall stature and muscular build stood out. Some mistakenly took him for an African American. The testimonies of Alyssa's relatives about the prolonged conflict with her former partner, Andrew Bird, immediately make him the prime suspect. Friends and colleagues of Alyssa spoke of his obsession, constant surveillance, and threats. Alyssa's new boyfriend recalled that Bird mentioned their full home addresses, although they had not disclosed this information to him. Detectives began surveillance of Bird's house in Rowlett. Soon they noticed Bird, accompanied by his fiancée Holly Elkins and daughter Willow, carrying suitcases and bags out of the house, clearly preparing to leave for a long time. When Bird got into the car, the police stopped him on the pretext of lacking a license plate. During the search of the car, men's boots cutting to pieces and soaked in bleach were found. Also discovered were remnants of camouflage makeup, napkins with makeup, and burnt parts of a brush for its application. In Baird's house, detectives found even more evidence, primarily batteries for GPS trackers that the criminal attached to the cars of Alyssa and her boyfriend. There was also a homemade silencer for a pistol and a whole arsenal of weapons. But the main discovery was a written script that Baird used when calling the police to report drugs in Alyssa's car. The police seized 3 phones from Baird, including a disposable one. In the search history of one of them, there were inquiries on how to remove gunpowder residue from hands. He was clearly trying to cover his tracks. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the city, an abandoned black Ford Expedition SUV was discovered. In the cabin, forensic experts found Alyssa's blood and fibers of a fake beard with Andrew's DNA. The car seller identified Bird as the buyer and remembered that he paid in cash and was in a hurry. Forensic examination revealed that the bullet that killed Alyssa was fired from the sawed-off shotgun found in the car. Bird's fingerprints were also found on the handle of a hunting knife. His handwriting was clearly identifiable in the GPS devices and in the calls with false accusations. It seemed that the prosecution had gathered comprehensive evidence of Andrew Bird's guilt. However, the prosecutors also aimed to hold his accomplice, Holly Elkins, accountable. Electronic correspondence between them came to the rescue, showing Elkins' role in planning and inciting the crime. The investigation lasted for several months. During this time, the prosecution meticulously assembled a mosaic of evidence, unequivocally incriminating the ruthless killers of Alyssa Burkett. The jurors were shocked by the cynicism and calculated nature of the criminals. They eagerly awaited the start of the trial to deliver a just verdict. Trial for the murder of Alyssa Burkett began in June 2022, almost 2 years after the tragedy. Sitting in the dock were 35-year-old Andrew Bird and his 23-year-old fiancée, Holly Elkins. They were charged with stalking, conspiracy, and first-degree murder. From the outset, the prosecutors made it clear that they intended to seek the maximum punishment for both defendants. In their opening statement, they painted a picture for the jurors of a massive conspiracy to take the life of the young mother. The correspondence between Baird and Elkins left no doubt about the meticulous planning of the crime. A key prosecution witness was Christopher Mayo, Alyssa's boyfriend at the time of her death. He told the jurors about months of harassment and persecution orchestrated by Baird and Elkins against them. According to him, Alyssa had mentioned multiple times that Baird seemed like someone capable of killing her. Mayo recounted the phone threats, constant surveillance, and attempts to discredit Alyssa in the eyes of social services and the police. He stated that Elkins was the public master directing Bird's actions. Her pathological jealousy and obsession with another's child ultimately led to the tragedy. Colleagues and friends of Alyssa shared the grief of the slain mother. Alyssa had confided in them, expressing fear of her unstable ex, feeling constantly watched. A few days before her death, she told a friend, "If something happens to me, know that Andrew did it." Forensic experts presented the jurors with a rich arsenal of physical evidence, unequivocally linking Bird to the crime scene. In addition to DNA and fingerprints on the murder weapons, there were traces of gunpowder and disguised fragments in his house and car. However, the nail in the coffin of the trial was the electronic correspondence between Bird and Elkins, eloquently demonstrating their joint plans. Phrases like, "I hope you can handle this, do it or die for me, this be asterisk, Teach must disappear," littered their messages in the days leading up to the murder. Bird's defense attempted to argue for the lack of premeditation in his actions. Supposedly, he only intended to scare his ex, but in a fit of rage, miscalculated his force. The defense emphasized the emotional distress and stress from the prolonged legal battle, but the correspondence in meticulous preparation for the crime completely refuted these speculations. Particularly telling were Bird's internet searches on removing gunpowder traces. Such actions do not align with those of someone who accidentally turned to violence. Elkins outright denied her involvement, citing an alibi. However, even here, her position was woven with white lies. Messages where she urged her partner to deal with the rival literally put a nail in the coffin of her innocence, at least in incitement. In the end, Bird admitted guilt on the main points. Apparently, he decided to mitigate his fate, avoiding a life sentence. He detailed, albeit quite impassively, the circumstances of the murder, his preparation, and motives. His key motive was an obsession with Willow, his daughter. Elkins stood her ground to the end. Even after the guilty verdict, she continued to proclaim her innocence and the injustice of the sentence. However, this did not help her escape a harsh punishment. In May 2023, the judge pronounced the verdict. Andrew Bird received 43 years in prison, effectively a life sentence. Holly Elkins was sentenced to 20 years for complicity. The courtroom erupted in applause. Justice, albeit delayed, prevailed. The killers of Alyssa Burkett received their due. The loved ones of Alice, with tears in their eyes, expressed gratitude to the prosecutors and jurors. Nothing will bring back our girl, but we are thankful that the guilty have been punished and no one else will suffer at their hands, said Alice's mother to the journalists. This tragedy will serve as a bitter lesson for all victims of domestic violence for a long time. The untimely and cruel death of Alice Burkett shook the residents of Texas and the entire America. A young mother, beloved daughter and sister, she was killed in the most despicable and inhumane manner by the hands of her former partner and the father of her child. Her story became a tragic symbol of the epidemic of domestic violence, claiming thousands of lives annually. Despite the just verdict for the killers, Alice's family does not hide. Their loss is irreplaceable. She was a ray of light in our lives, recalls her mother, Teresa, determined, with a huge loving heart. She lived for her daughter and dreamed of giving her the best. Most painful was the fact that Alice sensed the danger and repeatedly reported it to her loved ones and the police. Alas, no one took her words seriously until it was too late. Perhaps more decisive intervention could have prevented the tragedy. She told me, "Mom, he will kill me." I know, but what could I do? The police shrugged, saying, "Until he does something, we are powerless." Alice's Aunt Shelley shares in tears. Particular concern arises for Alice's daughter, 2-year-old Willow. She lost her mother at such a tender age and will surely not fully grasp the extent of her loss for a long time. Custody of the girl was granted to her maternal grandparents. They vowed to do everything to ensure Willow grows up in love and never forgets her mother. Every day I show her photos of Alice, tell her how wonderful she was. Willow is still young, but she already reaches for the pictures, caressing them with her finger. Despite everything, we will continue to live on. For her, says Alice's grandmother, Teresa, and Alice's story raises uncomfortable, yet critically important questions. Why do signals of domestic violence victims often go unnoticed? How can we improve the protection and response system to complaints? What prevents us all from being more vigilant about the problems of friends and family? Experts urge early recognition of warning signs of abusive relationships, pathological jealousy, control, isolation from friends and family, outbursts of aggression. Victims need to know they are not alone and can seek help at any time by contacting hotlines or crisis centers. The most important thing is not to remain silent, not to tolerate, not to consider it normal. Violence is never acceptable, and it rarely stops on its own. Alice was strong, but even the strong sometimes need help, emphasizes psychologist Anna Byers, leading a support group for abuse survivors. Alice's death should not be in vain. Her case once again shows how important it is to take threats and signs of violence seriously, especially when the well-being of children is at stake. No family drama is worth a lost life. The name of Alice Burkett will forever remain in the memory of her loved ones and fellow citizens. Her photos and posts on social media continue to gather likes, comments, and words of support even years after the tragedy. Many see in her an example of resilience and dedication to loved ones despite all trials. Rest in peace, dear Alice. You will forever remain in our hearts. We will continue your work and love Willow as you loved her. Justice has prevailed, and now you can rest peacefully. We will always remember your goodness, willed her grandfather Russell on the first anniversary of her death. Perhaps someday in the future, Willow will be able to read these words and learn what an amazing woman her mother was. A woman who fought for her until her last breath and did not let her love fade even in the face of monstrous cruelty. Her short but bright life will forever be an example for all mothers. Alice Burkett's story is not just another criminal chronicle. It is a tragedy of a young woman who only wanted one thing: to love and raise her daughter. But her life was cut short by those who vowed to protect her. Her child's father and his new partner. Obsession, jealousy, desire for control. These were the true motives driving Andrew Bird and Holly Elkins. Neither pleas from Alice, nor fear of the law, nor thoughts of the well-being of little Willow stopped them. In pursuit of a sick passion, they crossed the final line. The most frightening thing is that Alice's case is just the tip of the iceberg. Hundreds of women across the country face domestic violence, harassment, and threats daily. Many are afraid to speak openly about it, considering their burden shameful. Unfortunately, the outcome of this silence can be fatal. Alice's example reminds us we must not turn a blind eye to signs of abuse in our own lives or the lives of our loved ones. Pathological jealousy is not love. Constant control is not care. And outbursts of aggression are not character. These are warning bells, SOS signals that cannot be ignored. If you have become a victim of domestic violence, know that you are not alone. There are people and organizations ready to lend a helping hand. Do not be afraid to take this step. Do not wait until the situation becomes deadly. Your safety and right to a life without fear are paramount above all other considerations. It is our collective responsibility to raise the younger generation in respect and acceptance, to teach them to resolve conflicts with words, not fists or guns, to explain that love does not tolerate violence. Perhaps then our daughters will no longer perish at the hands of those they once let into their hearts. I don't know if Willow will ever understand why and for what her mother died. But I know for sure, Alice loved her more than life. Her last thoughts were surely about her daughter. And there, in the heavens, she continues to watch over her little one, said her brother Landon at her funeral. Someday Willow will grow up and be able to read this story herself. The story of her mother's life, love, and struggle. May the memory of Alice be a source of strength and faith in a better future for her. And for all of us, a bitter lesson, a reminder and call to action. We owe it to her. We owe it to each other. Sandra Renee Cantu, born on March 8, 2001, was the daughter of Maria Chavez and Daniel Cantu, a couple of Hispanic origin. Sandra lived with her mother, grandparents, and 3 older siblings, 2 sisters aged 20 and 11, and a 15-year-old brother in a trailer park named Orchard Estates. This park, consisting of about 100 homes, was known as a safe and family-friendly community in the city of Tracy. Sandra's father, Daniel, resided in Mexico and had limited contact with her. Tracy is a city in Northern California with a population of around 80,000 people. It is considered a suburb of the San Francisco Bay Area with roughly 70% of its workforce employed in Silicon Valley, home to many emerging and global technology companies. Despite this, the city maintains strong agricultural roots with crops such as tomatoes, alfalfa, and peaches. In the 1970s, Tracy had only 15,000 residents, but it grew in popularity and population as the Bay Area expanded. Sandra's family settled in this growing city. Sandra, a second grader at Melville Jacobson Elementary School, had long, light brown hair with golden highlights from spending a lot of time in the sun. She was a sweet, innocent, bright and amiable child who loved visiting neighborhood friends, doing cartwheels and reading children's books. Her friendly nature allowed her to make friends easily, and she was always ready to help. Her favorite character was Hannah Montana. On Friday, March 27, 2009, after school, the 8-year-old visited a friend's house before returning home around 4 p.m. to check in with her family. She then went out again, saying she was going to play at another friend's house. It was common for neighborhood kids to play at each other's homes and in the open spaces of the park, which included a basketball court and a pool. However, that evening was unusual because Sandra did not return home as expected, which was highly unusual for her. She always knew to check in with her mother by dinner time. The family grew increasingly anxious when they discovered that the friend Sandra mentioned was not home that afternoon. Sandra had never left the trailer park area before. At 7:53 p.m., the family, now very worried, called 911 to report Sandra missing. The police began their search at Sandra's home and expanded throughout the neighborhood. They collected footage from a surveillance camera near the family's residence, which showed Sandra crossing the street in front of her house. This video was broadcasted on national news channels to aid in the search. The police conducted a thorough search of the mobile home park and interviewed all residents, but found no leads. The FBI joined the search over the weekend of March 28 and 29. Police dogs, rescue teams, all-terrain vehicles, and a California Highway Patrol helicopter were all involved in the intense search effort. More than 250 people from 13 different agencies participated. Divers searched a nearby lake but found nothing. Officers went door to door in the park, questioning every resident and inspecting all vehicles. The search continued without pause. The authorities even offered a $22,000 reward for information about the case, but no traces of Sandra were found. The first suspect was a local man named Frank, who had been seen kissing Sandra on the lips 2 years earlier at the local pool when she was 6. Frank, about 60 years old, had been spotted by Sandra's grandmother in 2007, brushing her hair away and kissing her on the lips. The family had reported this incident at the time. With Sandra's disappearance, Frank was questioned by investigators. He claimed he had nothing to do with the incident and had kissed her only to be nice. The police seized some of his CDs as part of the investigation. Detectives also interviewed Sandra's father, Daniel Cantu, but he lived in Mexico and had minimal contact with his daughter, having not seen her for over a year. The tragic discovery came 10 days after Sandra's disappearance on April 6, 2009. Agricultural workers draining a reservoir a few miles from the neighborhood, a task they perform twice a year, made a shocking find. At the bottom of the reservoir, measuring about 150 meters long and 30 meters wide, they found a suitcase. Inside was Sandra's body, curled in a fetal position. She was wearing the same clothes she had on when she went missing, a Hello Kitty t-shirt gifted by a neighbor for her birthday and black leggings. The horrifying crime stunned the residents of Tracy, leaving Sandra's family devastated. For days, dozens of people left flowers, posters, candles, and stuffed animals in her memory. An autopsy revealed that Sandra had been beaten and sexually assaulted with a foreign object before being asphyxiated. Toxicology reports showed she had ingested a powerful sedative. The suitcase was identified as belonging to Melissa Huckabee. FBI experts developed a preliminary profile of the suspect, believing it to be a white male between 25 and 40 years old, with a criminal history involving sexual assault or child pornography, who kidnapped for sexual purposes and then killed. They initially focused on all the men in the trailer park, but later turned their attention to a completely different suspect when they identified the suitcase's owner. Playing in the enemy's house, Melissa Huckabee was born on February 23, 1981 in Orange County, California. She was the eldest of 9 grandchildren. At 28 years old, Melissa was a volunteer Sunday school teacher at the Tracy Baptist Church, where her grandfather served as pastor. She grew up in Southern California and lived between Tracy and Orange County after high school. As an adult, she faced difficult times and struggled to find and keep a stable job. In 2002, Melissa Huckabee filed a restraining order against an ex-boyfriend, accusing him of harassment, death threats, and assaulting her grandfather. That chapter soon ended, and in August 2003, while 5 months pregnant, she married her then-boyfriend Johnny Huckabee. That same year, Melissa declared bankruptcy with debts totaling $26,300, including thousands of dollars in medical bills and credit card expenses. Her struggles continued, as her marriage did not work out. They separated in August 2004, and their divorce was finalized in September 2005. Divorce documents revealed that Melissa accused Johnny of kidnapping their daughter and domestic violence, charges which Johnny vehemently denied. Despite this, Melissa gained full custody of their daughter, Madison. Melissa, always a loving mother with a strong religious upbringing, lived in Southern California, where she worked as an event planner and studied criminology at a community technical institute. She loved crime dramas, especially the popular series Law and Order. Despite her efforts, Melissa led a solitary life and had a history of mental health issues, including severe conditions such as borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. According to her family, she struggled to raise her daughter alone and sometimes experienced episodes of depression. Additionally, she had a history of self-harm, cutting her ankles to balance her mind. She was prescribed several potent medications, including benzodiazepines, amphetamines, and an antidepressant. Melissa also took furosemide, a diuretic used for heart problems and hypertension. In 2007, Melissa was considered a person of interest by police in connection with 2 fires in La Palma, California, about 300 miles from Tracy, but she was never charged. In June 2008, her grandparents asked Melissa to help them pack for a move to Tracy, changing her plans. She had lived in Tracy years earlier and decided to settle there again with Madison, moving into her grandparents' trailer. Sandra Cantu lived in the same neighborhood, just 5 houses away. In January 2009, a 7-year-old girl went missing for several hours in the trailer park, prompting a police report and an intense search that lasted several hours. Melissa eventually brought the girl home, but according to the family, the child appeared drugged. She could barely speak and cried incessantly, unable to stand or walk without assistance, collapsing each time she tried. Her parents took her to the hospital where tests revealed benzodiazepines in her bloodstream, medications typically prescribed as sedatives or to induce sleep, alleviate anxiety, muscle spasms, and prevent seizures. The family feared the girl had been sexually abused, but medical examination showed no evidence of this. A Tracy police officer interrogated Melissa, who reacted indignantly to the accusation. At the same time, it was revealed that the girl's mother had drug problems. With no evidence against Melissa, the case did not proceed. Another peculiar incident highlighted Melissa's odd behavior. She told a 37-year-old man she occasionally dated that she was pregnant, leading him to decide to marry her. Melissa even had the phone number of a bridal shop written in her notebook. On March 2, 2009, the couple met at the church, where Melissa gave Daniel a drink that he found to have a strange taste. He could not remember anything after that night. The police later found Daniel unconscious near a fast food restaurant. He woke up in jail but never reported Melissa. This incident occurred about 3 weeks before Sandra's death. On the day Sandra disappeared, while the police were searching the area, Melissa sent a text message to Maria, Sandra's mother, asking her to inform the police that something had been stolen from her house around 4 p.m. She added that she wasn't sure if this information would impact the investigation. Earlier, Melissa had called the manager of the trailer park to report a stolen black suitcase she claimed to have left outside her home. She even mentioned the stolen suitcase in media interviews. The day after Sandra vanished, during a vigil for her, a very agitated and tearful Melissa approached investigators, saying she found a note on the ground. The note, filled with spelling errors, read, "Canta locked in a suitcase thrown in water on Bikety Road and Whitehall Road. Witness." Suddenly, Melissa's demeanor changed, and she became completely calm, which caught the attention of the officers. At the time of Sandra's death, Melissa was on probation for a 2006 theft in Los Angeles, but she had no record of violent behavior. 2 days before Sandra's body was discovered, Melissa was admitted to a local hospital, claiming she had accidentally swallowed a razor blade while sleepwalking, which seemed to be a suicide attempt. Before Sandra's body was found, Melissa was not a primary suspect. She was interviewed several times, but the police believed she was merely seeking attention and had no evidence linking her to Sandra's disappearance. However, everything changed when Sandra's body was found in the very suitcase Melissa had reported stolen. Investigators then began to scrutinize Melissa's behavior more closely. Another crucial clue emerged when a retired Marine and his wife informed the police that they had seen Melissa in her SUV at the irrigation pond on their property at Piketty and Whitehall Streets between 5:30 and 6 p.m. on March 27th. The couple recognized Melissa from television and noted that she appeared distracted and in a hurry when they saw her. Melissa had told them she stopped there because she needed to urinate. The police quickly continued reviewing the surveillance footage from the camera outside Sandra's house and observed that the girl was walking towards Melissa's house at 3:54 p.m. on March 27th. The camera also captured Melissa's SUV driving in the opposite direction 8 minutes later. Soon after, Melissa called the neighborhood manager to report a stolen suitcase. Around 5:30 p.m., a surveillance camera in the church parking lot recorded Melissa driving towards the irrigation pond, and half an hour later, she was seen returning. New evidence surfaced at the church when FBI agents conducted a thorough search and found a metal rolling pin in the kitchen with a blood stain and a bent handle. DNA analysis confirmed the blood matched Sandra's. They also discovered that the cord used to close the suitcase was the same type missing from the blinds in the Sunday school classroom. Investigators interviewed Melissa's grandfather and collected several items from the family home. On a computer at the house, they found a news article from September 2008 about Diverse finding a suitcase containing the remains of a missing 4-year-old girl. On April 9, 2009, Melissa was discharged from the hospital at 7 a.m. Later, she went to the police station for another round of questioning. After an hour, she was asked to return the next day. On April 10th, she underwent 6 hours of intense interrogation. Over time, Melissa broke down, transitioning from calm to distressed. She eventually admitted to causing Sandra's death, fabricated an elaborate story of accidental death and panic. Melissa claimed that on that day, she intended to take the suitcase to the church, but encountered Sandra and decided to play hide and seek. She said she told Sandra to get into the suitcase, then zipped it up. According to her bizarre account, Melissa left her keys and cell phone, drove to the church, and forgot about Sandra. When she returned and opened the suitcase, she found the girl lifeless. She claimed she tried to revive her and placed a small towel on her forehead to cool her. Panicking, Melissa said she then decided to dump the suitcase in the reservoir. The story was obviously not credible, leading to Melissa's detention in the county jail. Initially, she broke down in tears, but soon regained her composure. For days after her arrest, Melissa was charged with murder with special circumstances of rape with a foreign object, lewd acts with a minor, and murder during a kidnapping. According to the prosecutor's charges, Sandra's death was premeditated and malicious following sexual abuse. The police believed Sandra was heading to Melissa's house to play, as seen in the surveillance footage, and was killed shortly after arriving. However, the police could not establish a motive for the crime. The community was shocked by the news. It was hard to believe that a local resident, a mother whose child played with other neighborhood kids, could commit such a brutal act. Melissa even received death threats, prompting heightened security measures during her court appearances. The trial was marked by shock and disbelief. Melissa appeared in court for the reading of the charges, wearing a red prison jumpsuit and shackles. She had marks on her forehead, apparently self-inflicted, and she cried and trembled as the judge listed the charges. Given the nature of the accusations, she faced either the death penalty or life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. During the hearing, Melissa's defense requested a court order for a medical evaluation of the accused and a gag order to prevent case details from influencing the jury. Many of Sandra's and Melissa's family members wept during the hearing with immense pain evident, especially when the charge of rape was mentioned. Melissa reacted strongly, closing her eyes and stifling a sob. Her father expressed that the family was in shock and did not recognize Melissa as their own. Her ex-husband stated that although Melissa had struggled with emotional issues and had been medicated, he never believed she could be violent. He was utterly astonished by the charges against her. When he saw her in court, he did not recognize her. Johnny had no further contact with Melissa or their daughter and sought custody after Melissa's incarceration. He remarried and had other children. Following the charges, there were at least 3 hearings in which Melissa refused to plead guilty or not guilty, delaying the judicial process. Finally, in June, she pleaded not guilty. In August, the district attorney added more charges related to drugging a 7-year-old girl in 2007 and her ex-boyfriend Daniel in March 2009. In April 2010, the defense requested the exhumation of Sandra's body for a second autopsy, but eventually withdrew the request. The county's chief medical examiner explained that relevant samples had been preserved for independent analysis. Should the defense wish to determine if Sandra had been raped, finally, on May 10, 2010, nearly a year after pleading not guilty in a routine pretrial hearing, 29-year-old Melissa changed her plea. She pleaded guilty to first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances of kidnapping. Melissa made a deal with the prosecution to drop the other charges against her, including lewd acts with a minor, rape, and drugging a 7-year-old girl and her ex-boyfriend. By admitting guilt, she aimed to avoid a potential death sentence. After the gag order was lifted, more details about how Melissa killed Sandra emerged. Based on the pathologist's report, the prosecutor stated that Sandra was suffocated with a piece of cloth soaked in alcohol. Authorities also found a blood-stained piece of fabric tied around Sandra's head and knotted with a rope. The cause of death was homicidal asphyxiation. According to prosecution documents, Melissa sedated Sandra, took her to the church, and sexually assaulted her with a foreign object, apparently the rolling pin that was found. Ultimately, Melissa was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on the day of her sentencing. She could only say she did not understand why she committed the horrific crime. She acknowledged that she would have to struggle with that question for the rest of her life. Sobbing, she apologized to Sandra's family, admitting she should never have taken Sandra from them. Melissa said she owed them an explanation, but still couldn't comprehend her actions. She also stated that she would live with the fact that she killed a sweet, innocent girl like Sandra for the rest of her life. That day, Melissa denied raping Sandra. She told Sandra's mother that Sandra did not suffer and that there was no sexual abuse. She asked for her forgiveness, although she admitted she couldn't imagine forgiving someone who harmed her own child. However, Melissa's claims were contradicted by the pathologist's report, which revealed that Sandra had a cut on her lower lip, an abrasion on her elbow, and injuries to her genital area. Toxicology tests also found traces of a medication used to treat anxiety disorders in Sandra's body. It was also proven that Melissa had written the note indicating where Sandra's body was located in the suitcase. The lingering mystery remains. Why did she do it? Melissa's history of mental disorders seems key. She was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, which affects how people feel about themselves and others, causing significant problems in everyday life. Those with the disorder often experience intense fear, impulsivity, and frequent mood swings. The prosecutor in the case speculated that Melissa killed Sandra simply to gain attention. The prosecutor suspected that Madison might also have been a victim of her mother. Madison had a history of frequent illnesses requiring hospital care. Moreover, Melissa had a record of self-harm and setting fires and had verbally or psychologically attacked others to draw attention. According to the prosecution, after the murder, she achieved her goal of being the center of attention. Another theory suggested that jealousy was the motive, as Sandra was loved by everyone, whereas Madison, who meant everything to Melissa, did not garner the same admiration. These, however, are speculations. Investigators are certain it was a premeditated crime, and they believe Melissa had been practicing by drugging the other 7-year-old girl and her ex-boyfriend before ultimately killing Sandra. Melissa's case is notable not only for its cruelty, but also because it is rare for women to commit such crimes. Only between 5% and 15% of sexual predators are women. Furthermore, they rarely commit sexual offenses against children, and when they do, they are generally accomplices rather than perpetrators. Women are typically seen as nurturing and less threatening, so images of women accused of sexual abuse are particularly shocking to our sensibilities. According to the United States Department of Justice, approximately 1 in 10 homicides is committed by women. When women kill, it is more likely that their victims are close to them, such as their children, boyfriends, or spouses. The traditional role of women is to care, not to kill. And when a woman commits murder, it is more often in self-defense or due to some form of mental illness. Sandra's case defied all these paradigms, and Melissa's motivation for ending the child's life remains a mystery. Carly was born on April 14, 1983, in the family of Steve McBride and Lorraine Williams. She was a cheerful and outgoing child with a close relationship with her parents. Growing up, Carly started experiencing more and more problems. She started abusing alcohol and illegal substances. Nevertheless, she made efforts to overcome these harmful addictions. In 2014, Carly was a 31-year-old woman that lived in Belmont, New South Wales, Australia. She was a mother of 2 children, 7-year-old son William and 3-year-old daughter Cadence. Carly's children were from different men, but I couldn't find any specific information about her relationship with her former partners. However, we know that Andrew Easton, Cadence's father, was one of the last people to see Carly. In 2013, Carly checked into a rehabilitation center to overcome her addiction to illegal substances. While there, she met Sale Kenneth Newson, the friendship with whom gradually grew into something more. From August 2014, Carly and Sale started spending almost all their time together. The couple had fights sometimes, but they seemed to be happy on the surface. On September 30th, 2014, Sale took Carly to Musselbrook, where her 3-year-old daughter, Cadence, lived with her father, Andrew Easton. Carly came to stay with her for a few hours. She entered the house of her former partner at about 12:30 p.m. Sale didn't stay with her, but they agreed he would return in a few hours. However, when Sale came to pick up Carly, she was no longer there. Carly's ex-partner, Andrew Easton, said they fought, so Carly left. She planned to go to the nearest McDonald's, located about a 20-minute walk from Andrew Easton's house. Puzzled that Carly didn't call to tell him where she would be waiting for him, Sale started calling her himself. Since all attempts were unsuccessful, Sale drove towards McDonald's, where she allegedly planned to go. Along the way, he looked around, hoping to find Carly sitting somewhere waiting for him. He suggested her phone was dead, but Carly was nowhere to be seen. She wasn't at McDonald's, where she supposedly went, or anywhere near it. Sale drove around the streets of Musselbrook for a while, but it was in vain. Carly seemed to disappear into thin air. When she didn't return home to Belmont that evening, Sale contacted the police. The detectives asked him the details of what had happened. It would be exactly the same thing every time. I would drop her off, she would get out and go to the front door. She would have her daughter in her arms and turn around and wave me off, Newsom said. She would ring me twice and text me twice every visit to let me know she was okay. But on that day, I dropped her off about 12:30 p.m. and things were just different. And I didn't hear from her again. Not a thing. I texted her, I called her, but the phone just rang out. Newsom said he turned up at the house about 4:30 p.m. as usual to pick up Carly, only to be told by her ex that she had left after an argument earlier that afternoon and headed on foot towards a McDonald's restaurant about 1 mile away. Undoubtedly, the following question arose. Did Carly leave her ex-partner's house, or Andrew Easton was hiding something? His story suggested he was the last person to see her. However, no other witnesses could confirm that Carly really left his house. Police interviewed neighbors and people living along the route Carly would have taken if she had gone to McDonald's. The fact that no one saw her has further increased suspicions about her former partner. Unfortunately, no surveillance cameras near Andrew Easton's house could confirm or deny his words about Carly leaving around 2 p.m. After reviewing the recordings from the surveillance cameras at McDonald's, the investigators found no evidence she was ever there. Police searched fields behind a nearby residential area for clues. However, a chief investigator of this case said nothing particularly remarkable had been found, adding that the investigation would continue. They urged anyone with information about the disappearance of Carly McBride to contact the police department. She was last seen wearing blue jeans, sandals, and a yellow t-shirt, and she was carrying a tan handbag. After obtaining a search warrant, the police examined the house where Carly was seen last. A group of police officers went there, hoping to find clues that could shed some light on what happened to the mother of 2 children. But after searching Andrew Easton's house, the police did not find new clues. Nothing there indicated that someone committed a crime in that house. However, investigators did find something suspicious. They discovered Carly's Facebook account got deleted a few hours after she vanished before the official report of her disappearance. This mysterious deletion of her account on a social network raised a lot of questions. Are the account deletion and Carly's disappearance somehow connected? Was she the one to delete her account, or did someone else do it? Why was the account deleted? Perhaps the Facebook messages could tell about what happened, and that's why someone deleted the account. To get answers to these questions, the detectives turned to the U.S. Department of Justice, hoping the latter would help restore Carly's account and determine who could have deleted it. Facebook data analysis is done at the company's headquarters in Menlo Park, California. But Sergeant Wright said Ms. McBride's Facebook friends could help New South Wales police. We're asking if anyone may have been in contact with Carly via Facebook or any other social media in the days leading up to her disappearance. If anyone noticed anything unusual, if they could come forward and let us know, he said. Given the timing of the Facebook page being shut down, and in the context of the disappearance, we think it's hugely suspicious, but it's also something that could hold some vital information about what happened to Carly. Carly's parents didn't believe their daughter had just fled to start a new life. Close friend and flatmate Carly Smith said nothing appeared out of the ordinary as she spoke with Carly on the phone as she traveled to Musselbrook. She was so down to earth. I would call her a free spirit. She was easygoing. She just loved life. Miss Smith said she was always there for her friends. If you were having a bad day, she just knew and she would be in contact. And she also made a plea. We all wake every day not knowing what happened, not knowing where she is, she said. You have to have a conscience. Come forward with some news. Just give us something. The police thoroughly searched the area where Carly was before her disappearance. The search included dogs, police divers examining the Hunter River and its surroundings, and aerial and trail bike patrols. And yet none of this helped to find any traces of Carly McBride. Months passed, but the investigation did not bring any results. Carly didn't leave any digital footprints. After she disappeared, she never turned on her phone. Her social media accounts were inactive, and she did not use bank cards. Investigators began to assume that Carly was no longer alive. 9 months after Carly's disappearance, her parents sought help finding their daughter. They were joined by Detective Timothy Seymour, who could contribute by requesting any information helpful to the case. Ms. McBride's mother, Lorraine Williams, shed tears during the public appeal and begged for help to find her beloved daughter. If you know anything, even if it's the smallest thing, please come forward and help us, she said. Steve and Lorraine said their family experienced difficulties after Carly's disappearance. We are coping the best we can, Mr. McBride said. As far as Carly's children are concerned, it's a fairly complex area. Both children have 2 different fathers. And to be honest, we haven't had too much close contact with those children. So we're just hoping that changes so we can have further contact with them. Detective Inspector Timothy Seymour said officers had worked tirelessly since Ms. McBride's disappearance. We have a plethora of information that we are sorting through. However, we are still appealing again, Inspector Seymour said. The breakthrough moment may come from somebody who might think they have an innocuous piece of information. Over time, Carly's parents started realizing that they would probably never see their daughter alive again. Lorraine wrote a heartbreaking letter addressing the man who robbed her of her daughter. I don't believe there is one person who does not now know what happened to my bub or hasn't noticed what has happened on that fateful day. Please help us for her children. They are innocent and gorgeous babies. Whoever you are, you have taken their mummy away. Their lifeline to fun times and happiness in their lives. Their tower of strength. They will never feel her soft, warm and reassuring kisses and her big warm hugs with that big contagious belly laugh of hers and her radiant smile. Their memories are lost. They cannot say goodbye to her. Our pain, anguish, angst and frustration are keeping us all down. causing us to wake up super vigilant that we might get a call to say they have found my bub. Whoever you are, you decided on that day to rip my daughter away from us. You bottom-feeding runt. We are left with question after question after question. We don't know how to grieve or what we are grieving. We are in a kind of grief limbo. Our little beautiful poor babies need to know where their mommy is. They are the innocent victims in this horrible nightmare we are enduring. Please someone come forward so they can move on and grow into the amazing people their mummy would have wanted them to be. We can't honor and respect Carly's life until she is found. My daughter is reeling you in, and you will be a fine catch when you least expect it. This is my only wish, that we find my bub, that we can put her to rest. It is a basic human right with the dignity and respect that she deserves. Then her babies and their beautiful but broken hearts and heads can start to heal, and they may have a life without the anguish and pain and angst. You didn't give my daughter a chance. Please give her children the knowledge they ache for. William and Cadence should not be burdened with this pain. Please help us give them some semblance of grief and loss in their journey. Carly is a proud Aboriginal woman, as is her beautiful sister, and I am proud and honored to be their mother. No one deserves this in life, but my baby is reeling you in. You are breaking while we are aching. Your truth is Carly's truth, and in turn is our truth. Please someone speak up. Since the police couldn't link Carly's disappearance to her ex-partner Andrew Easton, they turned their attention to another potential suspect, Sale Newson. During the investigation, they learned that the relationship between Carly and Sale was far from perfect. The man was very jealous, which was a frequent cause of their fights. Despite their relatively short relationship, Newson told everyone he was deeply in love with Carly, mentioning she was the first woman he had fallen in love with in the last 14 years. He desperately asked for any information, participated in launching a Facebook page, offered financial rewards, and knocked on every door in the area where she was last seen. But notwithstanding these public statements of love and devotion, Newsom almost immediately started intimate relationships with other women. Besides, a few hours after reporting Carly missing, he offered sexual intercourse to several women. Carly disappeared on September 30th, and on October 2nd, spent the night with another woman. But in public, he behaved like an inconsolable guy who had lost the love of his life. Detectives also discovered that Sale and Carly had an argument 2 days before her disappearance. The reason for this fight was Facebook messages that Carly allegedly received from other men. However, all this was only circumstantial evidence. They needed direct links to bring any charges against Sale Newson. In April 2015, the authorities searched properties at 3 addresses, one in Muswellbrook and the other 2 in Scone. Scone is a town in the Upper Hunter Shire in the Hunter region of New South Wales, Australia. The distance from Scone to Muswellbrook is about 15 miles. During the searches, they seized 3 firearms and an unspecified amount of illegal substances and arrested a 24-year-old man, James Canan. However, the police stressed that the charges weren't related to the ongoing investigation into Carly's disappearance. And yet, they did arise during this investigation. Thus, we should keep this name in mind. Almost 2 years have passed since Carly was last seen alive. The police continued to investigate, but there were no new clues to help solve the case. But then, suddenly, there was a breakthrough. On August 7, 2016, in a rural area near Scone, 2 local pedestrians found the remains in a shallow grave in a bush just a few feet from the road. Forensic examination confirmed that these were the remains of Carly McBride, a mother of 2 from Belmont, who went missing on September 30, 2014 in Muswellbrook. The police postponed the announcement of finding her body for 4 days, hoping to obtain additional evidence. Superintendent Guiana repeated police suspicions that they did not suspect Carly, 31, had been snatched off a street by a stranger. We don't believe that this was a random act, so we are looking into her past and as many people as we can find, he said outside Scone Police Station. But he stopped short of identifying any suspects in the case, as it is all too fresh. It has taken us 2 years to get this breakthrough, and we have a fairly vast volume of fresh evidence that we need to evaluate in a thorough fashion, he said. We have put a lot of work into this in the past 2 years. The team here is pretty keen to solve this for Carly's family, and we have got so much new evidence now that it is going to take a lot of work. "But we are well into it," he said. "The heartbroken parents have told through tears of their desperate need for answers. Please come forward with anything, Lorraine sobbed. "We still need to know who did this to my baby." The couple said they have had some closure now with her body being found and were extremely grateful for the police and public help to find their lost daughter. For 10 months, the investigators carried out extensive work, which resulted in the issued arrest warrant for Sale Newson. On June 19, 2017, he was arrested and taken to a police station. Newsom denied any involvement in the death of Carly McBride. However, Sale Newsom wasn't the only one who received charges. Police believed that 26-year-old James Cannon was the one who helped Newsom dispose of the body. Carly McBride, Sale Newsom, and James Cannon met in a rehabilitation center for people with addiction to alcohol and illegal substances. Each one left the center at different times and for various reasons, but they stayed in touch. Trial of Sale Newson began in August 2018 and protracted for several years because the police had only circumstantial evidence. Prosecutors alleged that Newson met with Carly after she left her ex-partner's house, struck her several blows to the head and back in a jealous rage, and threw her body away. Forensic experts have determined that Carly McBride died from multiple blunt force trauma. She suffered 23 fractures to her skull, 13 fractures to the torso, and spinal and rib fractures. The judge said Carly McBride suffered blunt force at the hands of Newsom before she died. Judge Erase also noted how Newsom had told interviewing police he was a skilled mixed martial arts fighter. His main sport was Thai boxing. "I had 20 fights and 20 wins. I trained alongside world champions. But when I got really good, I got too old," he told police. "I find the cause death was severe trauma to the brain due to a high degree of force to the deceased's head," the judge said. "I am satisfied the offender caused death by the use of fists or feet or both or the use of objects." While searching Newsom's house, police found the map in a shoebox under the bed. This map contained a drawn circle around the towns of Muswellbrook and Scone. Carly's remains were found exactly in this radius. That map also had the numbers 1, 2, and 3 written on it in locations outside Muswellbrook, with Senior Constable Mohini giving evidence that the first 2 numbers marked the location of point-to-point cameras. After the police found Carly's remains in 2016, Newson called her father, Steve. During the conversation, Newson mentioned that the found skeleton was missing hand bones, and yet the police never disclosed this information. The only people who knew about it were the police, Carly's parents, and the Department of Forensic Medicine at the John Hunter Hospital. As the authorities believed, Newson knew about it because he was familiar with the crime scene, and he was the person who left Carly's body where they found it 2 years later. Moreover, the clothes on Carly's remains matched the ones she wore on the day of her disappearance. It suggested she died shortly after leaving her former partner's house. The police couldn't find her purse and phone. When police searched Newsom's mobile phone, they discovered he had deleted Google location services between September 18th and October 2nd, 2014. During the trial, the investigators learned that the photo of Carly, which Newsom took on the way to Muswellbrook and later used in missing person flyers, was edited and cropped even before the police received the report of Carly missing. When the search for Carly began, Newsom offered a $20,000 reward for information about her whereabouts. However, his bank account showed he was broke, which meant he offered the reward only because he knew no one would ever find her. Thus, he wouldn't have to pay. Newsom injected himself into the police investigation from the start, trying to deflect suspicion onto others and attempting to get information about where police and other emergency services would be searching. He also conducted a canvass of the neighboring streets searching for CCTV or witnesses, which police said was done not to find information, but to suppress it and to determine if anyone had seen him intercepting Ms. McBride. And while volunteers and police searched for her around Muswellbrook and handed out missing person flyers, Newsom was in Sydney, messaging friends about how he was driving an Audi R8. As well as that, Newsom claimed to know the area where Ms. McBride was found, like the back of my hand, and described it to Carly McBride's father, Steve McBride, despite only seeing footage of a fake crime scene set up by police. The images you are seeing now are not a real crime scene, but a staged one that the police used to see Newsom's reaction. The more investigators dug into Newsom, interviewed him, looked at his Facebook messages, listened to his phone calls, the more he shone the light on himself. After examining his internet search history, investigators discovered that he was looking for information on how to delete a Facebook account. His account remained active, but Carly's account got deleted shortly after. Although all the evidence was circumstantial, the prosecutor said they did have puzzle pieces that began to reveal a picture when put together. Eventually, these pieces turned into an irrefutable case, ruling out any other possible explanations for how Carly McBride disappeared, and how her body was about 82 feet from the side of the road. The judge concluded that the motive for the brutal and unplanned attack on Carly was Newsom's jealousy. After he picked Carly up from Musselbrook, he discovered she had spent about 90 minutes with her ex-partner instead of spending time with her daughter as was planned. Carly's daughter was not at home during that time, and the fact that she was alone with her ex-partner for an hour and a half allegedly ended with Newsom attacking Carly in a jealous rage. Ms. McBride's mother, Lorraine Williams, told a sentencing hearing that she lived in a blur of grief and anxiety for 2 years as she waited for her happy, gorgeous, and outgoing daughter to come home to her 2 young children. Instead, the next time she saw Carly was in the morgue, a day she tearfully described as the worst day of my life. Carly should be here, living her life with her children, her sister, her father, and me. Ms. Williams said, "After today, I never want to hear, speak, or see the man who took my beautiful daughter's life ever again. He no longer has any power to hurt me, and I refuse to think of him anymore. I will miss Carly for the rest of my life every second of every day," Ms. Williams said. Almost 7 years after he reported Carly missing, 43-year-old Newsom was found guilty. In December 2021, he was sentenced to 27 years in prison with parole eligibility in 2038. After the sentencing, Newsom turned to the judge to restate his innocence. "I understand the verdict's been the verdict," he said. "Your Honor, I'm innocent. From the day I reported Carly missing to this very day, I've been compliant with the police, with the courts, with the jails, everything. And I've been found guilty of a crime that I did not commit. Someone out there has committed this crime, and it wasn't me. It wasn't me. And now I've got a big struggle ahead of me to try and clear my name through the courts after this." James Cunning, who helped Newsom dispose of Carly McBride's body, denied his guilt. However, in July 2022, a jury found him guilty too. The judge said Cunning lied to police in 3 interrogations to create a false alibi for Newsom and deleted data from the phone to cover his tracks. "Unfortunately, I couldn't find his picture, but it is known that when Cunning received charges in the Carly McBride case, he was already in prison for illegal weapons possession and prohibited substances." In November 2022, the 31-year-old Cunning showed almost no reaction when he was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison with a 4-year parole period. After the trial, Carly's parents said that although justice had prevailed and no matter the verdict, nothing would ever return their daughter. Rachel Parnasky was born on June 15, 1994 in Mission, British Columbia, Canada. Details about her early life are scarce, but it's known that she grew up surrounded by the love of her mother and sister. Those who knew Rachel as a child with beautiful green eyes often commented on her infectious laughter, which could brighten anyone's day. Information about her father is limited. It's only known that he was far from exemplary, had multiple relationships, and fathered several children with different women. Rachel was always friendly and well-liked. At one point in her life, she maintained a close relationship with her half-brother on her father's side, Matthew Parnasky, who was nearly 10 years older than her. Matthew was born in 1985 when his mother was only 18. His parents separated when he was young, and at 2 years old, he was sent to live with his father and stepmother. When he was 11, he returned to his mother's home, apparently due to conflicts with his stepmother. Matthew claimed that his stepmother physically abused him, hitting him with spoons while his father did nothing to protect him. Feeling unprotected, Matthew eventually moved back with his mother, resulting in almost no further contact with his father. As time went on, Matthew found it increasingly difficult to connect with people. He left his mother's home and moved in with his grandparents, who later divorced. During his youth, he was sexually abused by an older neighbor, a secret he kept to himself. Matthew felt blamed for his grandparents' separation and believed his mother had abandoned him early in his childhood and saw him as a burden when he returned during his teenage years. He felt rejected by his father. This combination of negative emotions significantly impacted him. After many years of not communicating with his father, Matthew attempted to reconnect by providing his contact information, but he never heard back. During this period, he maintained a relationship with his stepbrother and lived with him at their grandfather's house for a while after both had left their father's home. However, this arrangement didn't last long as they were both eventually kicked out of their grandfather's house. Amidst these complex situations, Matthew did not finish high school. However, he managed to attend a diploma program at a university and obtained a securities license. In his early 20s, Matthew's father separated from the stepmother who had abused him during his childhood. Matthew hoped this would improve their relationship, but it did not. In his early 20s, he struggled to overcome the pain and anger from the rejection he experienced from his grandfather and mother, who insisted he needed psychological help, believing his perspective was distorted. However, Matthew resisted seeking professional help. It appears he was diagnosed with depression at the age of 20, but did not take any medication or attend therapy to address it. Instead, he turned to less conventional methods to cope with his pain, leading him to substance abuse. His already erratic behavior worsened due to these habits, resulting in actions he would later regret. Turning back to the life of Rachel, Matthew's half-sister, it is known that her life was also challenging, but she had the unconditional love of her mother and sister. The charming girl fell in love at a young age and became pregnant. She and the baby's father welcomed the child, named Marco as a blessing, though they did not live together. At 18, Rachel was going through a difficult time, living in a basement suite in Mission and being unemployed. Marco, who was a year old at that time, lived with his father and paternal grandmother since Rachel couldn't provide the quality of life he deserved. However, she remained a loving mother who kept in close contact and visited her son on Fridays and Sundays. In mid-March 2013, Rachel had planned to go shopping with a friend. When Rachel failed to show up, her friend became worried and contacted Brittany, Rachel's sister. Brittany immediately went to the basement apartment Rachel occupied to check on her. Upon arrival, she found no signs of forced entry, but two things were unusual. Rachel's cell phone was left at home, and music was playing. It was out of character for the young mother to leave without her phone or to leave the radio on. The family informed the police about her disappearance, stating that the teenage mother was last seen on March 16, 2013, at her home in Mission. Shortly before her disappearance, Rachel had been active on various social media accounts, posting photos on Instagram and tweeting about incidents in her hometown. She had no history of running away, prompting the police to categorize her disappearance as concerning. Rachel's neighbor recalled seeing her wearing jeans with sparkly decorations on the back pockets and a purple sweater. Rachel was at her house in Mission, smoking and drinking with a man in a baseball cap around midnight on Saturday. The neighbor, who was also outside smoking a cigarette with her husband, didn't notice anything unusual or felt the need to call the police, as it seemed like Rachel was just having a friendly conversation. By 1 a.m., the neighbor looked outside again and saw that the pair had left. The following Sunday, volunteers cleaning up the northeast corner of the highway informed the police they had found clothing matching the description of what Rachel was last seen wearing. However, police investigations determined that the clothing found was not related to Rachel's case. The family was desperate due to her unusual absence. Unfortunately, after days of exhaustive searching by family, friends, and police, Rachel's body was discovered on Tuesday night. Her body was found in a ditch about 30 miles from her home by a passerby who saw it from the road and called the police. Due to the difficult terrain, a search and rescue team was called to retrieve Rachel's body. The detective stated that the initial search effort involved 25 officers, but didn't anticipate the case ending in homicide. Sergeant Jennifer Pound of the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team, Canada's largest homicide unit, said in a press conference that although Rachel's murder didn't appear random, the police had no suspects in custody and no definitive motive. However, She clarified that they were not idle and had already interviewed several individuals. Officer Jennifer noted that it was still unclear whether the young woman was killed at the location where her body was found or if she had been dumped there. She added that the social media accounts Rachel frequently used could be crucial in identifying the killer. The results of the autopsy were expected within hours, but would not be made public due to the ongoing investigation. Sergeant Jennifer also stated that Rachel's murder had left a void in her family, made even more painful by the fact that she had left behind a small child. She urged anyone with information that could help solve the case to come forward to the police. 2 days after Rachel's body was discovered, over 300 people braved the wind to pay tribute to the young woman at a heartfelt vigil in Heritage Park, Mission. Among the attendees were the father of Rachel's child, who held their baby in his arms, along with other family members, friends, and community members. The atmosphere was filled with sorrow and disbelief, as many of those present had participated in the search for Rachel and never imagined it would end so tragically. Speakers at the vigil remembered Rachel for her positive attitude and sense of humor. Despite the initial outpouring of grief and tributes, time marched on. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. Life went on for everyone. While the case seemed to stagnate or be forgotten, at least in the eyes of Rachel's family. What they didn't know was that detectives had been diligently working behind the scenes, relentlessly gathering evidence to bring the perpetrator to justice. The most shocking revelation was the direction the investigation had taken and the closeness of the perpetrator to the victim. On June 23, 2016, there was enough evidence to support charges related to Rachel's murder, and on June 24th, the responsible party was arrested without incident. On June 27, 2016, after 3 years of investigation, the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team announced that they had sufficient evidence to support the charges. The accused turned out to be none other than Rachel's half-brother on her father's side, who was 27 years old at the time of the murder. Matthew, then 31 and residing in Richmond, was charged with second-degree murder, along with a second, particularly heinous charge, desecration of a corpse for having sexual contact with Rachel's dead body and disposing of it. Sergeant Jennifer stated that it was a tragic case that had left a family with many unanswered questions. She clarified that, from the beginning, the investigative bodies had worked together to follow the evidence and bring charges. She mentioned that it took 3 solid years of dedication and commitment from all the investigators involved to achieve justice for Rachel. She noted that Matthew had been considered a person of interest from the start of the investigation, but they needed to carefully piece together all the facts to avoid jeopardizing the extensive efforts made. A statement written on behalf of Rachel's family was also read, expressing their gratitude and relief at the arrest of the suspected killer, though the wait for justice continued. The start of the trial was delayed longer than Rachel's family had hoped. It wasn't until 2018 that the case finally went to court. Just as the trial was set to begin, Matthew, her half-brother, pleaded guilty to her murder. Matthew's guilty plea resulted in an automatic life sentence. But a judge during the sentencing hearing had to decide how long he should remain behind bars before being eligible for parole. For second-degree murder, the sentence typically ranges from 10 to 25 years. The Crown's lawyers and the defense attorneys presented a joint recommendation to the court in June 2018, suggesting that Matthew could be eligible for parole after serving 13 years in prison. On July 4, 2018, as scheduled, the sentencing hearing took place in the British Columbia Supreme Court. Wendy Stevens, representing the Crown, recounted that Matthew was arrested and charged following an operation called Mr. Big, in which an undercover agent posed as the head of a criminal organization. Details of the trial were published online by the Abbotsford News, a community newspaper in Abbotsford, British Columbia. It was revealed that Matthew confessed to Mr. Big that he had killed Rachel, with whom he shared the same father. The confession was recorded with hidden cameras. Wendy, the Crown representative, explained that on the night of the murder, Matthew had gone to Rachel's residence to apologize for abusing her when she was a child. He was 14 or 15 years old at the time of the assault and was found guilty at 19, receiving a sentence of probation as disclosed in court. Wendy also detailed that Rachel had exchanged text messages with a friend who asked how her conversation with Matthew was going. She replied that it had been a good emotional conversation, but that she was very tired and hoped he would go home soon. Matthew saw this message and became enraged. The prosecutor continued, highlighting that Matthew confessed in 2016 to the undercover officer that Rachel's text message made it seem like she was the victim while he felt he had suffered through the accusations and judicial process. To Matthew, the fact that he had sexually abused his sister when she was just a child seemed insignificant. Wendy explained that in a fit of rage, Matthew hit Rachel on the head, immobilized her, and suffocated her by covering her mouth and nose with his hand. He then transported her body to his residence in Abbotsford, sexually assaulted the corpse, and disposed of it. After committing these crimes, Matthew tried to cover his tracks by sending text messages from Rachel's phone after her death, and getting rid of her keys and other personal items. When it was the defense's turn, the defense attorney argued that the murder had been a traumatic event in Matthew's life, leading to panic attacks, sleepless nights, flashbacks, and nightmares, requiring treatment for depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder, which he was receiving in prison. He claimed that Matthew had an unstable childhood, shuffling between parents and grandparents, which generated a lot of unresolved anger and frustration. However, she stated that he could improve as he was participating in prison programs that helped him understand his issues. The courtroom was filled with Rachel's family and friends who had to listen to the horrific details recounted by the prosecutor about Rachel's suffering and the defense's argument portraying Matthew as a victim. Wendy then read the victim impact statements aloud, representing Rachel's sister, mother, and the father of her child, detailing the devastating emotional toll her death had taken on the family. On July 4, 2018, the judge agreed with the joint sentencing recommendation made by the Crown and defense attorneys during the June hearing. He stated before the British Columbia Supreme Court that he believed 13 years was an appropriate time for Matthew to become eligible for parole based on sentences in similar cases. He emphasized that Matthew would still serve a life sentence even if granted parole, as he would always be subject to certain conditions. He added that parole was never guaranteed and could be revoked. He described Matthew's actions as repulsive. After the court session, Rachel's sister expressed that her family felt relieved but mostly exhausted by the entire experience. She added that the family was not surprised by Matthew's guilty plea, as they had always suspected him, despite lacking evidence. Responding to Matthew's claims of suffering, Brittany emphasized that Rachel was the only victim and that Matthew could portray himself as a martyr to gain sympathy or pity. But he was not a victim. She stressed the importance of remembering this crucial fact. Perhaps the most poignant evidence of the tragedy's impact was contained in a letter the family provided to Sergeant Jennifer. In it, they expressed that Rachel was a mother, daughter, sister, and friend, and her absence had left many broken hearts in great devastation, as she was missed and remembered every day. They described Rachel as a sweet, strong, and beautiful young woman with her entire life ahead of her, but she would never get the chance to live out her dreams. They highlighted that her senseless murder left behind a child who would never know his mother and would one day need answers to questions no child should have to ask. The family noted they no longer had words to describe their pain or the difficulty of processing everything that had happened, and they requested privacy while expressing gratitude that justice was served, though nothing could ever compensate for the loss of Rachel's young life. Finally, Brittany said the family hoped to use their experience to help others going through similar tragic circumstances. She emphasized that there should be more support in such painful situations. She remarked that no mother should have to close her deceased daughter's bank account or receive mail addressed to her dead daughter in response to some bureaucratic procedure, as it was too difficult to bear. Brittany suggested that it would be very helpful to have someone designated to handle tasks, such as making phone calls to various government agencies, so that families wouldn't have to repeatedly explain that their loved one had passed away. She announced that, holding on to hope, the family was trying to focus on raising Marco, Rachel's son, who was 6 years old at the time of the sentencing and was as good and smart as his mother. On February 5, 2010, at York Crown Court, Harold Landry's trial began under heavy scrutiny. Harold was accused of taking the life of his wife, Lucy Davis. The final hearing, marking a climactic end to this grim saga, took place in early February 2011 at Wolverhampton Court. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Judge David Fett, known for his uncompromising nature, presided over the proceedings. Harold Landry, a 64-year-old man, the center of this legal battle. The prosecutor, Rachel Brand, presented the evidence against Harold, painting a chilling picture of the events leading up to Lucy's tragic death. Brand's cold and precise delivery of facts left little room for doubt about Harold's guilt. Harold Landry had been convicted of murdering his 38-year-old wife, Lucy Davis. Harold, who was supposed to be Lucy's protector, now stood condemned as her murderer. Pete, Harold's friend and lawyer, unable to bear the burden of defending him, passed the case to Andy Childs, an experienced attorney. Childs faced a daunting task: to convince the court that Harold had not intended to kill Lucy, but was driven to uncontrollable aggression. Throughout the trial, Harold was a figure of misery and regret. He wept openly, professing his love for Lucy and expressing deep remorse. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter, hoping to mitigate his sentence. The defense argued that Harold's actions were a result of an irresistible outburst of aggression, provoked by circumstances beyond his control. However, this argument faced fierce opposition. The prosecution presented the court with shocking photographs of Lucy's injuries. The sheer brutality depicted in these images spoke volumes, overshadowing Harold's claims of unintentional harm. Each piece of evidence painted a grimmer picture of Harold's actions on that fateful day. When the final verdict was announced, Harold Landry was sentenced to life in prison. The decision brought a sense of closure to the legal process, but left an indelible mark on all those involved. This tragic case stands as a somber reminder of the fine line between love and violence. It underscores the unpredictable nature of human relationships and the devastating consequences when that line is crossed. Lucy Davis's death serves as a poignant example of how quickly love can turn into a nightmare, leaving a trail of heartache and loss in its wake. Domestic violence can lead to fatal consequences, as it did in 1971 among the picturesque Welsh landscapes. Born in the small town of Pontypridd, Lucy Davis was a charming girl whose childhood was filled with unconditional love and warmth. Roger and Andrea, Lucy's parents, created an atmosphere of happiness and comfort in their home. Together with her younger sister Anna, Lucy grew up in the beautiful village of Glencoe. Lucy took her first steps among majestic mountains and enchanting forests. Her charming smile and kind heart set her apart from other children. She easily won the sympathy of her teachers and peers. Seeing his daughter's passion, her father gave her and her sister the opportunity to immerse themselves in the magical world of horseback riding. Under the strict guidance of experienced instructors, they learned the basics of this noble art, conquering peaks and overcoming obstacles. Lucy and Anna became professional horse riders. Spending her childhood in Wales was a real paradise for Lucy Davis. She blossomed like a beautiful flower there, absorbing the beauty of nature and the love of her family and loved ones. The hobby of horse riding not only gave Lucy and Anna loyal companions, but also served as real school of life. Horses taught them discipline, self-control, and responsibility. The sisters' talent and perseverance were recognized at prestigious competitions where they won multiple awards. However, Lucy's world wasn't limited to the riding arena. Her excellent mind and hunger for knowledge motivated her to make new discoveries. Music became another passion of young Lucy. She enthusiastically took flute and piano lessons, honing her skills. Her efforts were not in vain. A year later, she played both instruments perfectly, charming audiences with her talent. Lucy was delighted to join the Glamorgan Youth Orchestra, where her musical journey continued to flourish. Lucy Davis dedicated herself to refining her musical talents, finding an outlet for her love of music and creativity within the school choir. Music wasn't just a pastime for her. It was a profound means of expression. Growing up, Lucy's days were a blend of carefree play and diligent work, instilling in her a strong foundation of dedication and hunger for knowledge, qualities that would shape her future achievements and endear her to those around her. In high school, Lucy crossed paths with Garrett Jenkinson, a fellow Welshman shrouded in mystery. Despite the enigma surrounding Garrett's past, the two formed a close friendship that only deepened over time. Though Garrett harbored romantic feelings for Lucy, he chose to keep them buried deep within himself. Upon graduating in 1998, Lucy was resolute in her pursuit of a musical career and higher education. She secured admission to the University of Yorkshire in Northern England, initially envisioning herself as a future music educator. However, as her ambitions evolved, Lucy found herself drawn to the bustling artistic landscape of a metropolitan city. This newfound aspiration led her to Grimy McAllister, whose worldview and sense of humor resonated deeply with Lucy. Their relationship flourished, prompting Lucy to introduce Grimy to her parents. The initial encounter proved successful, solidifying the bond between Lucy and Grimy and setting the stage for their future together. Roger and Andre recognized him as the ideal life partner for their daughter almost instantly. After careful consideration, Lucy and Grimy made the decision to move in together, forging their own family. Sometime after the move, Lucy proposed the idea of official cohabitation, which Grimy agreed to in 1995. Even while still pursuing their studies in college, they welcomed a son into their lives, whom they named James. Lucy opted to take a break from her own pursuits to focus on caring for her son, while Grimy diligently continued his studies to provide for their family, taking up night shifts at the city's postal sorting department. Lucy into a whirlwind of challenges, but she faced them with optimism and determination. Despite her deep love for her family, the months spent at home with her child were tinged with loneliness. Rarely did she and her husband find time to be together, and his night shifts only exacerbated the situation. Seeking solace and connection, Lucy created a social media account under the pseudonym Miseria, immersing herself in a virtual community where she could share her experiences and forge new friendships. It was within this online realm that her attention was captured by a user named Harold Landry, a 53-year-old entrepreneur hailing from Louisiana. Rising from humble beginnings, Harold's fervent pursuit of independence and success from a young age propelled him to establish a thriving company manufacturing hydraulic equipment for major oil companies in the southern United States. His hard work not only brought him material wealth, but also garnered him prestige and eventually billionaire status. Conversing with Harold proved to be a revelation for Lucy. His life experiences, unwavering dedication, and boundless generosity left her captivated. However, their relationship faced its share of challenges. The disparity in their ages, social standings, and lifestyles created friction between them. Harold's life seemed extravagant and diverse, filled with eccentric hobbies and lavish acquisitions, including real estate holdings on KML. In Mexico, Harold's marital status was shrouded in mystery. He had been married twice and divorced twice, yet nothing was known about any children from these unions. However, in 1992, Harold's life took a dramatic turn when he divorced his second wife and crossed paths with Geraldine Price. Geraldine, born in 1966 and originally from Mexico, was 20 years his junior and married to Chris Price with 2 children. Despite her familial ties, Harold managed to capture the heart of this young woman. On February 6, 1994, Harold orchestrated a romantic dinner for Geraldine in New Orleans. They hired a babysitter, Christian Hutton, to tend to their children, allowing them to enjoy an evening devoid of parental responsibilities. As the night drew to a close, escorted his girlfriend home. In a gesture of gratitude, he offered Christian a ride home, to which she accepted. Unbeknownst to Harold, fate had a surprise in store. Chris Price, Geraldine's husband, had been surveilling the couple. Upon witnessing their clandestine affair, Chris resolved not to let the matter slide. He pursued Harold, and when they halted at a red light, Chris unleashed a torrent of accusations. Despite Harold's composed demeanor, the situation escalated. In a fit of rage, Chris dared Harold to shoot him. Without hesitation, Harold brandished his firearm, warning Chris of the consequences. Ignoring the warning, Chris goaded Harold further. In a swift and decisive action, Harold fired, striking Chris in the neck. Miraculously, prompt medical intervention spared Chris's life. In 1997, Harold stood trial in St. Mary Parish Courts, charged with the attempted murder of Chris Price. His attorney, Pete Fannin, argued that Harold had been entrapped. Although the jury found Harold guilty of aggravated assault with a weapon, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, following an appeal, Harold was released on parole, having paid a fine and completed community service. Harold found himself forever indebted to Pete for his legal representation and unwavering advocacy, which ultimately secured his freedom. As their friendship blossomed, Harold and Chris reached a settlement agreement, though the exact compensation remained undisclosed. Settling in Covington as a wealthy man, Harold openly shared his past with Lucy, including failed marriages and a troubling incident. Rather than repelling Lucy, Harold's revelations only seemed to deepen her attraction towards him. His gift of persuasion captivated her, and after parting ways with Grimmy, Lucy and Harold decided to embark on a romantic relationship. Eager to shield their love from unnecessary complications, Harold endeavored to avoid any potential troubles. In the early 2000s, he journeyed to England to meet Lucy's parents, Roger and Andre, who, despite initial surprise at the age difference, supported their daughter's choice wholeheartedly, refraining from interference in their relationship. Expressing his devotion through lavish gifts, including expensive jewelry, Harold spared no expense in fulfilling Lucy's desires. His love for her grew so intense that thoughts of marriage lingered constantly in his mind, yet he insisted on perfection before taking the plunge. Seeking to fortify their bond, Harold extended an invitation to Lucy, her son Jameson, and her ex-husband Grimmy for an unforgettable trip to Mexico. To Harold, Mexico wasn't merely a vacation spot. It represented paradise, amplified by the proximity of Pete's apartment, lending an air of comfort to their excursion. Inspired by the purchase of a diamond engagement ring, Harold excitedly shared the news with Pete, who harbored suspicions about Lucy's fidelity due to her frequent rendezvous with Grimmy. Blinded by love, Harold proposed to Lucy, and she accepted his proposal, leading to their marriage in the midst of 2003. Acquiring a $1 million home in Warshire County, their new family life in the neighborhood overflowed with joy. Welcoming Jameson into the family with open arms, Harold treated him as his own, fostering a strong familial bond. Soon after their wedding, their daughter, Hearth, was born, becoming the apple of their eyes. Surrounded by supportive neighbors like Rachel Clark and Stephen Kennedy, Lucy and Harold's familial ties deepened with each passing day. However, as time went on, issues began to arise in their relationship. Harold grew increasingly demanding, expecting Lucy's unwavering obedience. Lucy, who had always been an independent woman, was not prepared to acquiesce to Harold's every demand. Arguments and disagreements became more frequent, casting a shadow over their family life. Their son, Jameson, bore witness to this tense atmosphere, and it negatively impacted his childhood. Even their neighbors began to take note of Lucy and Harold's escalating reliance on alcohol, exacerbating their familial problems. However, when the arguments and shouting ceased, neighbors interpreted it as a sign that the family was attempting to reconcile. In 2009, Lucy found solace in virtual conversations with her old-school friend, Garrett, via social media. Sensing his wife's emotional distance, Harold made the difficult decision to leave for Mexico, allowing Lucy space. In his absence, Lucy invited Garrett to visit, blindsiding Harold upon his return. Lucy swiftly filed for divorce, prompting Harold to begin an affair with their neighbor, Rachel Walbon. The divorce proceedings were marred by disputes over property division. Lucy, adamant about keeping the house for the sake of their children, opposed Harold's insistence on selling it. Their disagreements intensified as Lucy revealed unsettling truths about Harold's past, further fueling the acrimony. Amidst the emotional turmoil, Lucy accepted Garrett's invitation to spend time with him in Wales, making no effort to conceal her phone conversations from Harold upon her return. Despite her efforts to salvage their relationship, the constant arguments persisted, and the tension between them became unbearable for Jameson and their daughter, Hearth. On the evening of February 1st, 2010, as the day drew to a close, Harold, intoxicated from several glasses of wine, was taken aback by the delivery of a package addressed to their neighbor, Stephen Kennedy. It was closer to 9 p.m. when Harold returned from work. Stephen noticed a notification that his parcel had been delivered to Harold. Seeing Harold at home, he approached him to retrieve his package. Harold greeted him warmly and offered him a drink. Stephen, not refusing a glass of wine, agreed, and Harold poured him one. As Stephen entered and greeted Lucy, he observed Harold was already inebriated. After a single glass of wine, Stephen took his parcel and left. Shortly after, a heated argument erupted between the couple. Regarding furniture for their new house, Jameson, hearing the commotion, rushed into the kitchen to witness Harold striking his mother with a kitchen utensil. Reacting promptly, he dialed the police and comforted his sister Lucy, who was then fleeing the house with the children. Lucy sought refuge at Stephen's house, hoping for assistance. However, en route, Harold caught up with her and viciously attacked her with a knife, stabbing her in the chest. Callously, he dragged her body under a bush and disappeared. Hearing Lucy's screams, Stephen rushed outside and discovered her body. Initially thinking she had fainted, he quickly realized the severity of the situation. Officer Steve C. Fox, arriving at the scene, promptly called for an ambulance and commenced a search for Harold. Despite efforts, Harold evaded capture, leaving behind terrified children who sought shelter until the police arrived. This tragic incident marked the onset of their family's downfall and the start of a grueling journey towards justice. An ambulance promptly arrived and transported Lucy to Yorkshire Hospital, but it was too late. Lucy succumbed to her injuries upon arrival. Meanwhile, consumed by fear and remorse, Harold sought solace at the doorstep of his friend Rachel. With trembling voice, he confessed to committing a heinous act, but withheld the details. In an attempt to atone, he transferred a substantial sum of $40,000 to Rachel, relinquished all his assets, including cash, car keys, and paychecks. After Harold headed home, the police began their search for him. They scoured the streets, interviewed witnesses, but Harold seemed to vanish into thin air. Finally, fortune smiled upon the detectives when Harold was arrested on his way from Rachel's house. His face, distorted by fear and remorse, spoke volumes. Lucy's family, Roger and Andrea, were overwhelmed with grief. In an official press release, they expressed immense sorrow for the loss of their daughter and declined to comment further. The forensic medical examination confirmed Lucy died from multiple stab wounds to the chest. Evidence found at the crime scene and the testimony of Jameson, Lucy's son, who witnessed the tragedy, became pivotal in solving the case. The tale of Harold and Lucy is a love story turned nightmare. Although the trial concluded, the echo of the tragedy will resonate for years to come. Harold Landry, found guilty of Lucy's death, was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 16 years before parole eligibility. He would be 82 years old upon release, but no sentence could bring Lucy back. Roger and Andrea found solace in the fair verdict, though their hearts remained heavy with grief. Harold Landry maintained his innocence, vowing to appeal the verdict, claiming he wouldn't change anything, even knowing the future. The Landry family remained resilient, promising to preserve Lucy's memory by embodying her best qualities for their grandchildren. Despite the irreparable loss, Lucy would forever remain a symbol of light and love in their hearts. Looking ahead, the Landry family embraced hope. Harold received the punishment he deserved, while Lucy's legacy continued to inspire her loved ones. With Lucy's love and light in their hearts, the Landry family found the strength to move forward, carrying her memory with them into the future. Thanks for diving into another mystery with us. If you enjoyed unraveling the clues and chasing the truth, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. Your support helps us bring you more thrilling cases and deep dives into the unknown.